Happy third Sunday in Advent. Here we are, working our way closer and closer. And I decided to, come be at the mimosa tree of Eric right here. So, the Deborah had a tree, so I decided to name this one after me. I didn't label it or anything, so if we ever move, no one else will know. But, there it is. But happy Advent. The season continues. Thanks to Pastor Kim for continuing his cool series about it. Appreciate that. And, and for everyone else, thank you for the Christmas cards we've received. Always appreciate that. It's very kind of you to be thinking about that. And today's jet going by, and you'll have to excuse the neighbor's dog. He's about as yippy as our dog, and when they get out here together, it's insane. But they have a doggy door, so he can come out whenever he wants, and does. So he has a lot to say. But the psalm today is Psalm 126, and for those of you with good memories, we went over this when we were talking about the songs of ascents. It is, one of them toward the beginning, and in that sense, it's appropriate because remember, the songs of ascents were the songs that you would sing on the way to Jerusalem when you were going there on the pilgrimage. So everyone would get together, and then you'd recite these or sing them as you were traveling up to Jerusalem. And up in the sense that not necessarily that it's geographically the tallest, but it's conceptually the tallest. Important-wise, it's the tallest. So, in that sense, it was you're ascending to do what needs to be done, to be there at the temple, to be there with God, to be there with God's people. So it has a sense of, I've left where I was, and I'm not yet where I wanted to be. I'm in the middle. I'm going there. I have my face set toward it. I'm heading where I want to be, but not there yet. I still have a ways to go. And in that sense, it's appropriate for Advent because that's what, Advent is about, is recognizing the journey toward the fulfillment of God's promise in the two different spheres. The one, people hoping for God's deliverance in the form of Jesus and looking forward to that, forward to his coming, and our realization of Jesus in our hearts, but looking forward to his second coming, to the total final fulfillment of God's promise in the form of his actual setting up his kingdom here among us. So from that standpoint, we recognize that we are in that not yet phase as well. We're still traveling in the form of the kingdom as it is now. But watch what they do in the Psalm, Psalm 126. When the Lord turned again our captivity of Zion, we were like those that dreamed. When our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with singing, then they said among the heathen, or that's the King James version of among the nations. If you ever, and I've mentioned this before, if you ever hear the word goyim or goy, we're the goy, the nations. And in that sense, it also meant heathen, the non-Jewish people. They said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, whereof we are glad. So, when the Lord redeemed our capture, turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like those that dream. I couldn't even believe it. Oh man, this is so cool. I don't even know what's going on. And it's, like you'd won the game show and the confetti's falling and you won the washer and dryer or whatever you get in a game show. And it was like you didn't even believe what was going on, and times 10, because they were stuck in bondage. They hated it. And when the Lord brought them back, they were like people that dreamed, and they recognized that the God working in the world like that made a difference. It ripples far beyond just the redemption of Zion. It made a difference in the world. And so here it was, the same thing. And that was verse 1 through 3. So verses 1 through 3, looking at the past, when God restored the fortunes of Zion, brought them back, and we didn't even know what to do. Much like, remember when we were talking about the journey toward the promised land of God's people. They traveled, they went, they had all these hardships in getting to escape Egypt. They get across the desert, 40 years, they're wandering. Finally, they get there, they get across. We're in the promised land, everything's so cool. And then the very next story is in Judges, where they screw up and God's having to bail them out with a judge. The fact is that they lived in the here and not yet phase as well then. And here, watch what happens. Verse 4. Turn again our captivity, Lord, as the streams in the south. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goes forth weeping, bearing precious seed. Lots more people traveling now than they did several months ago. Verse 6. He that goes forth weeping, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. And now you want to sing, bringing in the sheaves. It's not an Advent song, but still, bringing in the sheaves. It's like now it's an Advent song, because here I just read the verse that it's from. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. So, you see there that the psalmist knew all about the here and not yet aspect of one traveling in service of the Lord. That God did bring the redemption of Zion. It did return it to the people, but things aren't settled until God comes in final victory. And that leaves us in the sense of recognizing that we are agents of God's kingdom here, working for God's purpose in the world among those that we inhabit the world with, that we're agents of God now in what we do and in what we say and in how we act and in what we think. All of those are important as we are bearers of God's image. But by the same token, it's the not yet that we also look forward to. Just like 2,000 years ago, the people recognized that God's Savior was on the way and in the fullness of time hadn't come, and then came. So we remember that in our Advent journey, but we also remember it in the same way that the psalmist did, in that almost parallel tracks that the psalmist talked about. When the Lord did this, Lord, restore our fortunes. The Lord did that in the past. We saw it. We know it. We rejoiced in it. We were like those that dreamed. We were glad beyond joy. And now we recognize God's power is needed in the present situation today as we look forward to his final salvation. So we grasp on to the same hope of streams in the desert, or in a newer translation, you might read waters in the Negev, or riverbeds in the Negev. And the Negev it does mean south, which is why you could translate it that. You could get south out of that. But the fact was that what the writer intended was, when they said south, if you're looking at a map of Israel, you see what's to the south is the desert. That's what's down there, is the desert. So when they translated Negev, they're trying to get a sense of what the writer was helping you to understand, that the writer said Negev meaning south, but meaning southern desert. So it's not quite accurate to say just south, because you don't get the sense of what the psalmist was saying. It's not quite accurate to say desert, because that's not actually the word that was being used. So if you use the word Negev, now, hopefully, everybody that reads the word Negev will say, oh, what's that, Negev? What does that mean? Well, here's what it means. We're going to tell you. Negev means the southern desert. And what happens in the southern desert? Most of the time, you go there and there are, there's nothing happening. It's all, desert. A few little scrubby plants around and not much else happening. Certainly nothing as, fabulous as the mimosa of Eric. And yet, there are water courses, river beds, that if you know what you're looking for, you can see them happening. And that's that way in the western desert. They call them arroyos. And that they're the same thing. You can go into these canyons, and they're, it's just dry and barren. And yet, if a rainstorm happens, the way they collect the water, it becomes this huge, maniacal river that can wash you away. And apparently, there are warning signs telling you, hey, this looks dry, but if there's a rainstorm, you get to high ground now. Don't wait, because if the water comes, it's too late. And in the same way, the psalmist was talking about the streams in the desert, the streams in the south, the streams in the Negev, being the dry water courses that are signs of the fact that water has been there and is coming. Not there now. It's a dry water course. It's just if you didn't know what you were looking at, it just looks like more desert. But the trained eye and the people that have been there and the people that have tracked it know that the water has come and will come. And this is where it's coming. This is where the stream is going to be. We know to expect the rain. As streams in the desert meant that you and I recognize God's hand in the past, just like the psalmist did. We saw God's hand work effectively then. We've recognized God's presence in our lives now, and that gives us the hope, in this case, the hope of Advent, to look toward the future, to know that it just like the water course in the desert, the place where the river is going to be blooming, is potential with life, is ready to happen, but hasn't yet. It's there. Everything is set. but it's not raining at the present. And in that same way, you and I, our job during Advent is to recognize the here and not yet here aspect of God's kingdom. And that our job is not to, isn't to give up, isn't to despair, isn't to say, "Oh, there's no water in that riverbed. Oh, geez, everything's awful." There isn't now, but there was, and there will be. A friend of mine was hiking out in the desert areas, and he said that their water's super precious there, and that at one point he came across this well, and it's just the old kind of pump that had the handle, and of course that went down to a plunger with a leather ring. And for those of you who've used them before, you recognize that you have to, if it has been a while that you haven't used it, you have to pour a little down there to wet the leather, and then get that going, and then pour a little more to prime the pump. And then if you do that, you'll get all the water you want. If you don't do that first step, you won't get any water. It's all down there in the ground, but the pump won't work until you put the water on it. And so the story went that you walked up to the pump and there's a canteen full of water. And it says, don't drink this water. Pour a little down the pump, wait a few minutes, and then pour the rest in to prime the pump, and you'll have all the water you want. When you're done, refill the canteen. If you drink the water in the canteen, that's all you'll get, and the next person won't have any. If you pour it down the well in anticipation that the pump will work, you'll get all the water you want and more. And you can have some for the future. But you have to trust that the well is going to work the way it's supposed to. You have to work in anticipation that things will work out. And in that same way, you and I are working toward the final resolution of the kingdom. And our job is to be those agents of Advent, continuing God's work in the world through hope and faith and acts of love. And by doing those, the deeds of love and kindness, the heavenly kingdom comes. And we work with God, even watching for the streams in the desert. So it's pretty cool. I want to once again commend you all for your fine faithfulness and work, and ask that you keep it up through these continuing times of uncertainty and having to sit in the house. Love you guys. If you need to hear a friendly voice, call one. If you need to hear my voice, call me. I know. I'm friendly. So, but seriously, if you need to talk to someone, call Reverend Kim, myself, any number of friends that are out there. But I love you guys. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Happy Advent.